Billy Purser, lovingly remembered by the world as Gary Burbank, was born on July 29, 1941, in Memphis, Tennessee. His life's journey was a delightful melody filled with humor, creativity, and a voice that millions came to know and love. For decades, Burbank's presence on radio brought light to listeners' hearts. With his magnetic personality, sharp wit, and unforgettable characters, he became one of the most cherished figures in American radio history. He passed away on August 28, 2025, at the age of 84, leaving behind a legacy that will forever echo in the memories of his family, friends, and loyal fans. At the time of his passing, he had built a net worth of about $7 million, a testament not only to his talent, but also to the immense love people had for his work. Early life and the call of radio. Growing up in Memphis, young Billy was filled with curiosity and an adventurous spirit. His path toward radio seemed almost destined, as though his voice had been carved out for the airwaves. In the early years of his career, he carried different names that mirrored his evolving personality and artistic experiments. He began humbly as Bill Williams at KLPL in Lake Providence, Louisiana, before adopting the name Johnny Apollo when he worked at KUZN in West Monroe, Louisiana. But it was in his hometown of Memphis where his presence began to shine brightly. He worked at WMPS in the mid-1960s, later moving in 1967 to WWUN in Jackson, Mississippi. Each step was a stone in the foundation of his soon-to-be iconic career. By 1968, destiny carried him to Louisville, Kentucky, where he quickly became a local sensation on Wakey. It was here that Billy Purser officially transformed into Gary Burbank, a name inspired by radio and television legend Gary Owens. Owens' famous announcements from beautiful downtown Burbank on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In became the spark that shaped Billy's lifelong identity. Interestingly, Gary's natural voice resembled Owens so closely that Owens himself later contributed announcements to Gary's programs. From that point on, Gary Burbank was not just a radio personality. He was a brand of laughter, satire, and entertainment. A career colored with satire and bold creativity. Burbank's career was never ordinary. He had a gift for storytelling, humor, and satire that stood out like a shining star. After leaving Wakey in 1973, he orchestrated an unforgettable prank during his final show, pretending to be shot by a disgruntled listener. That audacious moment became legendary in radio circles, a true example of his fearless comedy. His journey took him to New Orleans, where he briefly served as program director for WNOE, and then to CKLW in Detroit/Windsor during the mid-1970s. He later returned to Louisville for a long and successful afternoon slot on WHAS-AM, before taking another brief adventure in Tampa, Florida at WDA. Finally, in 1981, he found his long-term home at WLW in Cincinnati, Ohio. Originally anchoring morning shows before moving to the afternoons, Gary created a platform that gave rise to some of the funniest and most memorable radio segments ever broadcast. No one was safe from Burbank's humor. With sharp satire, he lampooned local politicians, public figures, and celebrities. Former Cincinnati Mayor Jerry Springer and Reds owner Marge Schott were often the center of his playful sketches. His satirical soap operas like The Reds and the Restless and The Hunt for Reds October turned struggling sports franchises into comedy gold. Similarly, All My Bengals hilariously chronicled Cincinnati's football woes. In 1980, Gary even reached the top 100 charts with his novelty song, Who Shot JR, a cheeky take on the famous Dallas cliffhanger. His ability to turn pop culture moments into laughter highlighted his brilliance as an entertainer. Sports or Consequences, a listener's playground. One of Gary's signature shows was Sports or Consequences, a trivia game that flipped the usual format on its head. Instead of hosts quizzing callers, the callers tested the host's sports knowledge. The fun lay not just in the answers, but in the energy, camaraderie, and playful consequences that followed. If the caller didn't phrase a question correctly, the line ended with a thunderous explosion sound effect. When the hosts answered correctly, the studio would burst into chants of, "We don't mess around," HEY. It was silly, fun, and unforgettable, everything Gary represented on air. Earl Pitts and national fame. Among Gary Burbank's most beloved creations was the fictional redneck philosopher Earl Pitts. Through this character, Gary delivered daily commentaries that were syndicated nationwide, reaching millions of listeners across 200 stations. Earl Pitts became a cultural icon in his own right, hilarious, exaggerated, and deeply memorable. Even after Gary retired, Earl Pitts' voice lingered on the airwaves until 2021, giving fans a few extra years of joy. By the late 1990s, Gary's WLW show was syndicated to regional stations across Ohio. Though the syndication ended by 1999, his best-of program, Weekly Rearview, kept the laughter alive. True to his whimsical spirit, he jokingly dubbed his network, the BBC, the Burbank Broadcasting Corporation, a playful twist on Gary Owen's legacy. Gary's dedication and humor didn't go unnoticed. He received back-to-back Marconi Awards in 1990 and 1991 as Large Market Personality of the Year, one of the highest honors in radio. In 2012, his lifelong contributions were celebrated when he was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. Beyond radio, a taste for business. Gary's entrepreneurial side blossomed with the creation of Burbank's Real Barbecue and Ribs in Sharonville, Ohio. The restaurant became a local favorite, known not only for its food but for the warmth of the man behind the brand. At one point, the chain expanded into multiple locations across Ohio and Kentucky, bringing his name into yet another sphere of community life. Although the restaurants eventually closed, they remained a fond memory for those who gathered there. Retirement reflections and writing. In March 2007, Gary announced his upcoming retirement, and on December 21, 2007, he hosted his final WLW show. Though he stepped away from daily radio, his legacy lingered as Earl Pitts commentaries continued until January 2021, when Gary finally retired the character due to age and health. But Gary wasn't done sharing his gift. In 2009, he made a joyful return to the airwaves to promote his book, Voices in My Head, a reflection of his career and the colorful characters he brought to life. It gave fans a deeper glimpse into the genius behind the microphone. A fond farewell. On August 28, 2025, Gary Burbank passed away in Louisville after a long illness. He was 84 years old. His departure left a silence in the radio world that can never quite be filled. He is survived by his devoted wife, Carol, his children Tracy and Sean, and several beloved grandchildren who will carry his memory forward. His fans remember him not just as a radio host, but as a friend who filled their commutes, afternoons, and evenings with laughter and joy. His humor softened the stresses of everyday life, and his satirical wit made even tough topics feel a little lighter. The legacy of a radiant voice. Gary Burbank's story is one of reinvention, resilience, and remarkable talent. From a small-town boy with a dream to a national radio figure, he gave the world laughter in its purest form. He could make an audience roar with satire, smile with silly characters, and even pause to think through the sharp wisdom hidden in his jokes. Even now, as his voice no longer graces the airwaves, the echoes of his laughter live on. His journey reminds us of the power of humor, that in a world often heavy with challenges, laughter truly is a healing gift. Gary Burbank's life was more than a career. It was a love letter to comedy, creativity, and connection. Though he may have signed off for the last time, his spirit continues to play in the hearts of those who tuned in and laughed along. Rest in power, Gary Burbank.